Stop pretending you belong here. Take your things and leave. My mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words landed heavier than shouting ever could. The room went still. A birthday banner drooped slightly above the dining table. Someone's laugh died halfway out of their mouth. I was 16, standing in borrowed shoes at a family party that smelled like fried food and perfume, and suddenly every pair of eyes was on me like I'd been exposed as a lie. You always ruin everything, my cousin whispered, not even bothering to hide it. My aunt sighed dramatically. My father stared at the wall, studying a crack like it was more important than his daughter being erased in real time. I felt my face burn, not with tears yet but with humiliation so sharp it almost made me dizzy. There's a special kind of silence that follows cruelty. Ziggy. It presses into your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. That's what wrapped around me as my mother grabbed my backpack and shoved it into my chest. Go, she said, eyes cold. I'm done raising disappointments. I didn't understand how a word could hurt physically until that moment. Hi everyone. My name is Naira Caldwell. And that night was when my life split cleanly in two, before and after being unwanted. I opened my mouth to speak but nothing came out. What do you say when the person who gave you life decides you're no longer worth space in the room? My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably a friend asking where I was, but my hands were shaking too badly to check. Music restarted behind me. Someone clapped. The party continued like I was already gone. The front door closed with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Outside the air was cruel. Streetlights blinked like they weren't sure they wanted to witness me either. I stood there for a second waiting for someone to come after me. Anyone. My mother. My father. A relative with a shred of decency. No one did. I walked because standing still felt like dying. Past houses glowing warm with laughter. Past families who didn't throw their children away over image and pride. My stomach growled. My throat ached. The city felt endless. That night I slept behind a closed convenience store, curled up on flattened boxes, counting cars instead of sheep. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow felt dangerous. But as the cold seeped into my bones, something else took shape. Quiet, stubborn, alive. If I could survive this, then one day they'd have to look me in the eyes and see what they tried to destroy. And they wouldn't recognize me at all. Morning didn't arrive gently. It came in sharp pieces. Sirens slicing the air, a delivery truck rattling the pavement, the smell of stale bread drifting from the bakery's back door. My body ached like I'd been folded the wrong way and left there overnight. I sat up slowly, cardboard creasing beneath me, my fingers numb. For a split second I forgot where I was. Then the cold hit my skin and memory rushed back in like a punch to the chest. I was still outside. Still unwanted. Still 16. My stomach twisted so hard I had to press my palm against it. Hunger isn't just pain, it's humiliation. It reminds you how fragile you really are. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls. Both from numbers I didn't recognize. No messages from home. Not one. I laughed then. A short, broken sound that surprised even me. I spent the day drifting. Libraries became shelters. Public bathrooms became mirrors I avoided. I learned how to keep my backpack hugged tight, how to sleep lightly, how to skin faces fast. Kindness and danger can wear the same expression. By the third night I met Mara behind a soup kitchen. She had tired eyes and a voice that sounded like she'd smoked hope away years ago. She didn't ask why I was there. She just handed me a bowl and said, "Eat slow. It lasts longer." That was the first rule I learned. Weeks blurred. Then months. I learned corners of the city my family never knew existed. I learned which streets stayed lit, which nights were worse than others, and how silence could be louder than shouting. Sometimes I replayed that party in my head. The music, the laughter, my mother's calm cruelty. I wondered if they noticed my empty chair. If my absence ever echoed. But one night, curled up under a bridge, watching rain stitch the dark together, a realization settled quietly in my chest. They thought throwing me out would end me. Instead, it erased the girl who begged to belong. And left behind someone who would never ask again. Winter taught me things love never did. It taught me how pain settles deep, how it stops screaming and starts whispering instead. My fingers cracked and bled. My shoes split at the seams. I learned how to keep my face neutral when men stared too long, how to disappear without actually leaving. School became a ghost I passed every morning. I'd stand across the street sometimes watching students spill out laughing, backpacks bouncing, futures neatly packed into schedules and lockers. I was supposed to be one of them. Instead, I memorized class times from a distance like they belonged to someone else. One afternoon, a security guard noticed me lingering. "You lost?" he asked. I almost said yes. Instead, I said nothing and walked away, my throat burning. That was when I realized something terrifying. If I didn't fight for myself, no one would even remember I existed. I went back to the public library and asked about night programs. GD prep. Free tutoring. The woman at the desk looked tired but kind. She slid a pamphlet toward me without asking questions. That pamphlet changed everything. I studied at night under flickering lights, fingers stiff, mind sharp with hunger and anger. I devoured books the way my body craved food. Law fascinated me, not the drama of courtrooms, but the quiet power of words that could change lives if you knew how to use them. Rules. Rights. Protections. Things I'd never been given. Some nights, exhaustion won. I'd rest my head on a book and dream of my mother's voice, still cold, still dismissive. I'd wake up shaking, reminding myself she couldn't hurt me anymore unless I let her live in my head. Months later, when a volunteer read out the names of students accepted into a youth recovery scholarship program, I almost missed mine. Naira Caldwell. The room blurred. My hands trembled. I wasn't special. I wasn't lucky. I was stubborn enough to survive. And as applause filled the small classroom, one thought rose louder than the rest. I wasn't crawling back to life. I was building something they'd never be able to take from me. The letter came on a Tuesday, folded once too many times, the edges soft like it had already lived a life before reaching me. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it, afraid of what hope might cost me if I let it in too fast. Congratulations. That single word made my chest tighten. The scholarship didn't promise comfort. It didn't promise safety. It promised opportunity, conditional, fragile, earned. A place in a transitional program. Housing with rules. Curfews. Accountability. School enrollment. Therapy sessions I didn't think I needed until I sat in the room and realized how much I'd buried just to survive. The first night in a real bed I didn't sleep. The mattress felt wrong. Too soft. Too quiet. My body stayed alert, waiting for something bad to happen because that's what it had learned to do. When nothing did, I cried, silent, shaking tears into a pillow that smelled like detergent instead of rain. Recovery isn't dramatic. It's small humiliations. Learning how to ask. Learning how to sit still without bracing for impact. Learning that hunger doesn't always come back if you miss a meal. I went back to school officially. Different building. Different rules. Same looks. Isn't she the girl who disappeared? I heard she ran away. No, I heard she got kicked out. No one ever asked why. I kept my head down and my grades sharp. Law stayed with me, followed me home, sat beside me at dinner, whispered to me late at night. Contracts. Systems. How power hides behind paperwork and smiles. One afternoon, filling out forms, I reached the emergency contact section. I froze. Mother. Father. My pen hovered. Then I drew a clean, decisive line through both names. That was the moment I understood the betrayal hadn't just been emotional. It was legal, social, absolute. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd erased me. So I did something quiet. Dangerous. I started planning a future that didn't include forgiveness. Only truth. Truth has weight. I felt it every time I sat in a classroom, every time I signed my name at the bottom of another form. Naira Caldwell. No shortcuts. No aliases. No borrowed identities. Just me, existing on paper, finally undeniable. I worked 3 jobs. Early mornings stocking shelves. Afternoons tutoring kids who still had homes to go back to. Nights cleaning offices where executives left behind half-drunk coffee and careless power. I watched how systems ran when no one was looking. Money isn't freedom. But it buys time, and time buys leverage. By 17, I'd filed for legal emancipation with the help of a clinic advisor who spoke gently and never once pitted me. When the judge read my case file, his jaw tightened. He didn't ask about my mother's intentions. He asked about my survival. The ruling was quick. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd ever felt. Not healed. Not whole. But mine. I graduated early. Top of my class. A counselor pulled me aside and slid another envelope across the desk. This one thicker, heavier, real. A pre-law acceptance. Full support. Housing included. That night, alone in my room, I finally let myself imagine a future that extended past tomorrow. One where my name wasn't whispered with shame but spoken with respect. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, a voicemail. It's your mother. We need to talk. Her voice sounded smaller. Careful. Like she was afraid I'd break if she spoke too loudly. I stared at the phone, my pulse steady. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I'd survived. She needed something. And in that silence I realized something colder, sharper. They hadn't come back because they missed me. They came back because I was no longer powerless. I didn't call her back. That was my first act of control. The voicemails stacked up over weeks. My mother's voice shifted, concern turning to irritation thinning into panic she tried to hide behind politeness. My father finally left one too. Short. Awkward. Like he was speaking to a stranger who might hang up at any second. Your mother's health isn't great, he said. We should talk. Health. The oldest lever in the book. I listened once. Then archived them all. Midterms came. Finals. Life moved forward not dramatically but relentlessly. I learned how to debate without raising my voice, how to dismantle arguments with calm precision. Professors noticed. One pulled me aside after class and said, "You don't argue to win. You argue to expose truth." He wasn't wrong. During winter break, a letter arrived, handwritten this time. My mother's handwriting shook. The words were careful, rehearsed. We made mistakes. Families fight. We're still your parents. No mention of the night I slept outside. No apology. Just ownership disguised as affection. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a folder labeled personal. Not because it mattered but because evidence always does. A month later I learned the real reason. My uncle's business, built on family money and silent favors, was under investigation. Fraud. Tax irregularities. Assets frozen. And suddenly someone remembered the daughter who liked reading law books. They didn't ask for help outright. They invited me to dinner. I stood outside that familiar house weeks later, older, steadier, breathing in the same porch smell that once meant safety. The door opened. My mother's face went pale when she saw me. Not because she was happy. Because she realized I hadn't come back as her child. But as someone who understood exactly how much truth could cost them. Dinner felt like a performance staged for an audience that no longer existed. The table was set with the good plates. Candles flickered like nothing had ever burned here before. My mother kept touching my arm as if physical contact could rewrite history. My father watched me the way people watch storms. Quiet, calculating, afraid of what might happen if they said the wrong thing. "You've grown," my mother said softly. "You look successful." I smiled. Not the kind that forgives. The kind that listens. They talked around the truth for nearly an hour. About family. About loyalty. About how mistakes happen. My uncle finally broke. "You understand the law now," he said, clearing his throat. "You know how things can be misunderstood." They didn't need my love. They needed my silence. My signature. My knowledge. They wanted me to protect the very system that had thrown me into the cold and locked the door. I asked one question. Just one. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" The table went quiet. My mother's eyes dropped. My father swallowed. No one answered. I stood up, calm as glass. "I survived without you," I said evenly. "I learned the law because I needed protection from people like this." I gestured at the room. "You don't get to claim me now." My uncle's face hardened. "You owe us," he snapped. That was the moment I felt it. The final separation. No anger. No sadness. Just clarity. I slid an envelope onto the table. Inside were copies. Reports. Timelines. Evidence I'd been quietly collecting for months. "I don't owe you silence," I said. "And I don't need revenge." I walked toward the door as my mother whispered my name. Too late, too soft. Behind me the house felt smaller than it ever had. And I knew the truth would finish what abandonment started. I didn't wait for the fallout. I didn't need to. By the time the investigation went public, I was already gone. Back to my life, my classes, my quiet routines. The kind of life built slowly, deliberately, without needing witnesses. News travels fast when guilt is involved. Phones ring. Doors close. Friends disappear. My uncle's company collapsed in weeks. Accounts frozen. Properties seized. The same relatives who once laughed at my absence suddenly stopped answering calls. Family parties ended. Invitations dried up. Silence replaced celebration. My mother tried one last time. She showed up outside my apartment unannounced, thinner, eyes hollowed by worry. For a moment I almost saw the woman she might have been. Then she spoke. "We didn't know it would get this bad." I looked at her, really looked. At the hands that pushed me out. At the mouth that never said sorry. "It was bad the night you left me outside," I said calmly. "You just didn't feel it." She cried. "I didn't." I closed the door gently, not out of cruelty but finality. Some endings don't need drama. They need certainty. Years later, when people ask how I survived being thrown away at 16, I don't tell them about the streets or the hunger or the fear. I tell them this. Being abandoned taught me who I was without permission. I didn't rise to prove them wrong. I rose because I refused to disappear. And somewhere in the quiet ruins of the life they tried to protect, my absence still echoes louder than my presence ever did.